I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Salvati. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
All right. Happy Sunday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sab's podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sab's podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show. And you can catch me there on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday, or you can catch me here on those days. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And welcome back, guys. I hope you're having a great weekend so far. I have two people joining me today, not just one, just two. JB's going to come on as well. But Jamal Green will be here around 6 p.m. Eastern. And then JB will be popping in here at 6:30 p.m. Eastern as well. I do have a hard stop tonight because I do have an appointment not too long after the stream. So I do want to make sure I kind of stay on time. So let's go ahead and jump right in, fam. What are we discussing today? Let's go ahead and show that beautiful thumbnail for you. And quick apologies. I'm sorry. I have to show it through Canva because I downloaded it, but I can't find it. It's somewhere on this computer. Anywho, tonight, ladies and gentlemen, what are we discussing? Glenn Greenwald, censorship. What is happening to Glenn Greenwald on a major platform? He sounded the alarm about this. Of course, if you are not aware of what's been happening in Brazil, we are going to talk about that today and how it could possibly affect us here in the United States if this path continues. We're also going to discuss the Bernie to Trump pipeline. So this was an interesting tidbit here that a viewer sent to me, and they wanted to know what was my opinion about it. They said they saw the video that Kyle Kalinske made on Secular Talk, and they said, Sabby, I really want to get your take on this. What do you think about this? Right. So JB actually is going to join me for that discussion too, because he also saw that video. So we have a lot to say about that there. I'm also going to discuss Rania Khalek addresses Abandon Harris. And I got to tell you guys, if you have not been watching Breakthrough News, they're really good. I mean, they've been around for quite some time, longer than I have been around. They cover a lot about foreign policy, but every now and then they'll cover domestic issues as well here in the United States. And Rania Khalek had there's two discussions recently on Breakthrough News about Abandon Harris. And I think you guys need to hear what is said. So I saw both of these interviews. I think it was not yesterday. Oh, yeah. Was it yesterday morning? I think yesterday morning, I saw both of those interviews and I was like, everybody needs to hear this. So what does that mean for Kamala Harris in November? We'll get into that. And last but not least, Jamal Green will be here. You may know him from the recent confrontation that he had with Roland Martin at the DNC event there in Chicago. But Jamal Green is also an activist. He also ran for mayor of Chicago as well. Very, very smart, intelligent young man that I think more people need to see and hear from. So we'll be hearing from him as well. And one of the things that I am going to discuss with him is what just happened in California. I don't know if everyone is paying attention to the news or if you just hear it when you watch the show, but crazy things happening in California at the state legislature. Obviously, activists are very upset, and rightfully so. So I'm going to ask him about his opinion about what just happened in California, about them not choosing to bring a certain bill to the floor. So you'll have to wait and stay tuned for that. ladies and gentlemen, we have so much to discuss. Let's go ahead to the chat really quick. Shout out to Timothy R. Blewett for becoming a Sabby member. Give Timothy a big whoop whoop. What's up, Tim? And yes, Max, I heard. Max says, Sabby, the hotel strike that you clued us into earlier is finally taken off. More power to the people. That's right. I'm hoping to get more information about that for Tuesday's show. But yeah, I was wondering if that was going to become a thing, if that was going to take off. And so that's good news to hear there. So I'm excited about that. Okie doke. Let's go ahead. We're going to jump in so I stay on time. Let me see if I can stay on schedule here. We're going to jump right in with this first story here that everybody needs to pay attention to because it's not just about Brazil. Okay, this is about censorship. This is about suppressing information, and it could happen to any country. It can happen to us here in the United States, and I think people need to see this. I'm going to start with this article here from The Guardian, and then we're going to go to Glenn Greenwald because I want you to hear what he had to say because he is directly affected by this because he lives in Brazil. So check this out, guys. That is Elon Musk there. He has been big topic of discussion recently. X, formerly known as Twitter, goes offline in Brazil after Elon Musk's refusal to comply with local laws. Woo! Listen to this, guys. One of the world's most popular social networks, X, has gone offline in Brazil, the country with the 5th largest digital population, after Elon Musk's refusal to comply with local laws meant it was blocked by the Supreme Court. Millions of Brazilian X users found themselves unable to access the network on Saturday morning as internet providers and mobile phone companies began to enforce the ban. Now, it was just, I want to say maybe late last year or very early this year. I believe it was late last year that I told you about the censorship in Brazil of the platform Rumble. So Brazil had decided not to feature Rumble in Brazil. Now, obviously, there is one particular journalist that is in Brazil and does have a Rumble platform, and that is Glenn Greenwald. So what happens when rules like this are enforced? And some of you may be wondering, well, how is Glenn Greenwald still doing his Rumble show? Because Glenn is using a VPN, and we'll get into that a little bit later. When The Guardian tried to access the network on its computer and mobile phone, it received a message reading, "Seems like you lost connectivity. We'll keep retrying." Large number of Brazilians sought shelter on the rival network Blue Sky, which reported that it had gained 500,000 users in the past 2 days. "Welcome to Blue Sky," the company posted to its new adherents in Portuguese. Blue Sky's new members include Felipe Neto, one of Brazil's top social media influencers with more than 17 million followers. Don't forget, when you go to another country, you're obliged to follow its legislation, even if you disagree with it. So that came from Nico there. The banning of X, which has more than 22 million users in Brazil, is the climax of politically charged month-long arm wrestle between the country's top court and the right-wing tech billionaire. Now, they are referring to Alexandre de Moraes here, the influential Supreme Court judge. He's responsible for the ban, had been spearheading an attempt to force X to purge anti-democratic far-right voices in the wake of January 2023 uprising in capital Brasilia, carried out by supporters of the former far-right president Bolsonaro. So here's a little bit here about Elon Musk, who has aligned himself with right-wing figures, including Bolsonaro and his U.S. ally Donald Trump, pushed back. And he's accusing Alexandre of squelching free speech and trying to censor conservative views. Musk's public attacks on Alexandre, many of them infantile and vulgar, were reminiscent of repeated online digs at the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer during the recent far-right UK riots. which X's owner was accused of inflaming. Now, obviously, again, the most popular, I think, investigative journalist that we all know that is in Brazil is Glenn Greenwald, who has a show on Rumble. He also heavily utilizes X, formerly known as Twitter. So, of course, he is directly impacted by this. I want you to hear from Glenn about how he's affected and how other people in Brazil are affected by this ban of X. And what does this mean for the future of free speech? And are we next? Let's get into this clip here.
Reuters today, quote, Brazil's top court threatens to suspend X by Thursday night. That's tonight. Quote, a Brazilian Supreme Court justice on Wednesday ordered billionaire Elon Musk to name a legal representative for his messaging platform in X in Brazil within 24 hours or face the site's suspension in the country. Early this month, X announced it would close its operations and fire its staff in Brazil due to what it called, quote, censorship orders from the judge, Alexandre de Moraes. X, at the time, claimed Moraes secretly threatened one of the country's legal representatives in Brazil with arrest if it did not comply with legal orders to take down some content from its platform. By the way, that was not a secret order. That threat was very explicit, that they would arrest executives of X in Brazil immediately if those censorship orders were not obeyed. Quote, in Wednesday's ruling, Moraes says that under the country's law regulating internet issues, companies that do not respect Brazilian legislation or the confidentiality of private information could have their activities temporarily suspended. I believe the deadline for this was 8 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock p.m. in Brazil, which is 7 o'clock Eastern here in the United States. So we'll check online to see whether or not this has already happened, but certainly the deadline has already elapsed, and a lot of people in Brazil are wondering how much longer will we have X available to us to conduct our public debates, to hear about news, to communicate, to organize. Here was the order from the STF, which is the, basically it's an acronym for the Supreme Court, the Supreme Federal Court of Brazil. There you see it's a summons, and it was posted on X, which is not even a legal order. But because there's no one in Brazil to accept this order, the STF, the Supreme Court of Brazil, just went on to X, and underneath the government affairs account of X, posted what they purported to be this legal order, a summons for Elon Musk and global affairs. It says Minister Alexandre de Moraes orders the Justice Secretary of the Federal Supreme Court to notify Elon Musk by electoral means of the decision given in the above-mentioned case on August 18th, which determined the summoning within 24 hours of the name and qualification of legal representatives of ex-Brazil and national territory, duly proven with JUCESP under penalty of immediate suspension of the activities of the social network X until the court orders are effectively complied with and daily fines are paid in accordance with Article 12, Section 3 of Brazilian law.
Now, let's pause here for just a second before he gets into a little bit more detail, because one thing I want to say is this. I am not a fan of Elon Musk. I find him to be quite annoying. I think he's just another rich billionaire who whines a lot, to be honest with you. That being said, does that mean that people should have their voices silenced from that platform? Absolutely not. I don't agree with a lot of the things that Elon Musk tweets on Twitter, but that doesn't mean that people shouldn't be able to use it. And I know some people hear this and they're like, oh, that's just Brazil. We don't have to worry about that. Well, I want you to think about what just happened to the CEO of Telegram. I want you to think about how the CEO of Rumble has also been affected. He fled France because he was like, I don't want to get arrested, just like Pavel in France, who was the CEO of Telegram. I want you to think about this. This is just the start. So it can start with Brazil and it can spread to other countries. I still was somewhat appalled that Rumble, that they were banning Rumble in Brazil of all things. I'm like, okay, the biggest platform is YouTube, right? That's the biggest, the video content platform out there that allows it's the second largest search engine. Google's the first. But they were going after Rumble. It was really weird, right? So I may not agree with conservative views, but that doesn't mean that the speech should be suppressed. And now we see what's happening. Now it's X, which is a huge, huge platform. I mean, there's millions and millions of people on X. And now it's just like, now X isn't allowed. So what's next? And which country is next?
In theory, let's just make this concession. If a foreign country or foreign corporation rather wants to operate in a certain country, it is true that in general, they have to comply with the laws of that country. And if they don't, they can be subject to punishment for violating the law like anybody else. The problem is when you have governments that are tyrannical and authoritarian and unjust and ordering political censorship, it's expected, especially for Western companies, that they're not going to comply with authoritarian regimes and shut down all opposition that's considered immoral. The Chinese demanded that of Google for a long time. Google became unavailable in China as a result. All the authoritarian countries that were taught to hate have had constant conflict with big tech over its refusal to censor dissidents or opponents of the government. And now this is contaminating the Western world as well. That's the context for all of this. It isn't as though there's somebody here convicted of pedophilia or child pornography who the Brazilian government is ordering X to ban or to take down and X is refusing. These are elected members of Congress, people democratically elected by the Brazilian people who have never been charged with crimes, let alone convicted of crimes. But this judge is simply saying, ban them, banish them from online, much as was done, let us recall, in the United States in January of 2021 to the sitting president of the United States, Donald Trump. Although in that case, that was a decision undertaken by the platforms themselves, the pre-Elon Musk Twitter era, as well as Facebook and Google. Nobody ordered them to do it. There was no government requiring it. That was a decision they made on their own, which in many ways you could argue is worse.
And I want to say this as well to that point about X and banning other people as well. I don't agree with platforms deplatforming people either, but I have no control over it. And we all know these platforms do this, but I 100% disagree with it. That being said, I swear to God, it's like 100 times worse when it's the government doing it. And that's one of the things that we did learn from the Twitter files. I'm still waiting to see the Facebook files. I would also like to see some YouTube files. I would like to see files for those platforms as well. But now you have in Brazil, you have the government banning platforms. There have been a number of times where we've had politicians here in the United States also wanting to put restrictions on certain platforms. Weren't they just trying to ban TikTok just a couple of months ago after October 7th? They wanted to get rid of it because they felt like, oh no, the younger kids are finding out too much information about the creation of Israel, and we don't want that information to get out. So what happened? The ADL jumped in and started putting pressure on the Israeli lobby. The Israeli lobby started to put pressure on the politicians, particularly those that are in the back pocket of the Israeli lobby that have AIPAC as a donor. They started to put pressure on those politicians. You need to bring this bill to the floor so that you can ban TikTok. But you can't use the reason of, oh, they're finding out too much information about Israel and we don't want people to know. You have to use this excuse of China is going to try to steal our data and our information. So that's why we need to get rid of it. So I know some people back then, they just said, oh, whatever. I don't use TikTok anyway. It's just a bunch of people dancing on there. That's for younger people. I really don't care. But what I was trying to explain to people is that it's only a matter of time before they come after other platforms as well. And it may happen to a platform that you do use and that you do care about. So if this continues in Brazil, there's no telling this could happen in other countries as well. And also, where the hell is Lula? Where is Lula on this issue? Because I mean, like, as much we've given him quite a bit of praise for standing up to the state of Israel, to push him back on Western imperialism, but he does not seem to be too good on this particular issue, on the censorship issue, on deplatforming, censoring information. So where is Lula? Something to think about.
Because it shows the power of big tech, but in this case, it's the government demanding it. Here is from a Brazilian newspaper today called Metropolis that is very close to Alexandre de Moraes, that is reporting on exactly what he's thinking. Quote, Moraes has already decided to ban X. He's already decided to ban X, but is still evaluating how to do it. Quote, STF Minister Alexandre de Moraes has already decided that he will vote to overthrow X in Brazil, given Elon Musk's likely failure to comply with the Supreme Court's orders. However, Moraes is still evaluating how he will formalize his decision. At the moment, Moraes is analyzing 4 different scenarios and should only make his decision official this Friday, August 30th, or during the weekend. So maybe Brazilians have a day or 2 left to use X while they figure out the best technical means for banning the entire social media platform from this entire large country. The first possibility is that Moraes makes a unilateral decision, does not submit it to the entire court. It is then considered the most remote option. The second would be to decide unilaterally, but take the decision to the entire court immediately so that it can be corroborated by other ministers, whether in person or virtually. Moraes already has the signal that the majority of the Supreme Court will follow him and vote for the ban of X. The other scenario is that before deciding unilaterally, Moraes takes the case to the full court to be judged in person. If that happens, the case will probably only be discussed next week. And the fourth scenario would be for Moraes to take the issue to a virtual full trial tomorrow over the weekend. This is the hypothesis considered most likely, according to ministers interviewed by journalist Guilherme Amado. One day I'll tell you about this journalist. But he is very close to Alexandre de Moraes, often serves as his messenger in the media. And that is probably an accurate summary of what Alexandre de Moraes is planning. Not whether to ban X from Brazil, just figuring out the best way to do it.
Yep.
Here is from Globo, the Global magazine as well. And this is actually quite unbelievable.
Before we get to this about the Global magazine, I want to explain to people, because when I first heard this news, I saw it on Twitter from Glenn Greenwald about Brazil banning X. And I'm still seeing people tweet on. And so I reached out to Nico House, who's also in Brazil. And I'm like, what the F is this? And he's like, yeah, I know, they're trying to push back on it. So in reality, here is what will happen. Obviously, people like Glenn and Nico, yeah, I mean, they're American, but they're still in Brazil. So because they live in Brazil, they have to follow the rules and the laws of that country. Now, how do you get around this? They can get around it by using a VPN. Here's the problem. A lot of people in Brazil, especially considering you're talking about a large segment of the population that is lower income or is poor, they can't afford to have a VPN. So if you can't afford the VPN, you're just not going to have access to X, to Twitter at all. So first it was Rumble, and now it's Twitter. Does everybody see what's happening here? So I don't know, guys. I warned people about this.
We have there the headline in Portuguese. So I'll just translate that for you, which is as a result of a lack of representation in Brazil, the Supreme Court has blocked the financial resources of Starlink, a completely separate company in which Elon Musk is involved. There's no ruling that Starlink has done anything wrong. In fact, Starlink provides free internet to many of the poorest areas in Brazil. In 2022, Elon Musk was awarded all kinds of official commendations from Brazilian authorities for his benevolent act of providing free internet connection to many of the poorest areas in Brazil that the government hasn't been able to provide on their own. And yet somehow this judge, even though there's no finding that Starlink itself did anything wrong, has blocked the bank accounts of Starlink in Brazil in order to punish X. The article says, quote, this is from Globo, after X failed to submit legal representatives, FTF Minister Alexandre de Moraes blocked the financial accounts of Starlink Holding. Last week, Moraes claimed the existence of a, quote, de facto economic group under Musk's command, and on August 18th, ordered to block all of their Brazilian financial assets in order to guarantee payment of fines applied by Brazilian courts against X. Another of Elon Musk's company in the country besides X is Starlink, which operates in Brazil, selling satellite internet services mainly in the North region. All Starlink staff in Brazil has already been notified in order to respond for amounts to Brazilian courts owed to Brazilian courts by X.
Yep.
And then we have the Brazilian text here. Last week, Moraes considered the existence of a, quote, this was what I just read you that had already been translated. So I want you to see how extreme this is, because it is genuinely remarkable the lengths to which not just Brazil, but countries throughout the democratic world are now willing to go to prevent the internet from being a free exchange of ideas where human beings can organize freely and privately.
Yep.
Because they recognize that is the one threat to establishment power and to status quo ruling class prerogatives. I've been talking about this for a long time. Until 2015, the internet was basically free. And there was obviously a lot of surveillance going on. But this form of brute censorship was not common at all. 2016 was the turning point. That was when European and American elites concluded they couldn't control people's thoughts, as evidenced by, first, the British decision to withdraw from the EU by ratifying Brexit, and then even more traumatically, from the perspective of Western liberal elites, the decision to vote for Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton and make Donald Trump president of the United States. And when they saw that, they decided that our media outlets that used to control how people think, the information they get, the kinds of opinions to which they're exposed, are no longer the gatekeepers. They lost their monopoly to the internet, to social media. And the only
That's right. And think back to it, guys. Politics has a lot to do with this, because think back to Obama 08. So at that point in time, during Obama's presidency, there was Facebook, right? So I think maybe not as many people were on Facebook right away, but there was Facebook that was around. There was also MySpace. But I think the difference was back then, at least when we talk about the political narrative, I didn't see a lot of exposure of, this politician exposed, of politicians as we do today. And I think the big political space, when we look at these platforms, does tend to be Twitter for the most part. I mean, how many of you go to Twitter and you'll find news on Twitter before you even see it on the TV, right? So that does tend to be the platform for political news and political information. But I think even back then, the vast majority of the American public was still being fed a narrative that fit the status quo and made the status quo happy. That changed come 2015, 2016, because all of a sudden the status quo did not get their way. Hillary Clinton, and you look back on it, they never predicted that Donald Trump would win in 2016. It was just always like, even Fox News was making fun of him when he was running. Now, once he won, that was a different story, but they were making fun of him. That was never really supposed to happen, right? Like, Hillary was supposed to be a shoo-in. And then there was an enormous amount, I remember during that time, particularly online, of negative comments and opinions about Hillary Clinton. There was information that was released that, again, I don't think the Democratic Party expected to get out to the public. But again, those things were all done online on those platforms. And then Hillary lost. And I think what has happened since then is I do feel like a handful of billionaires that have invested money in those types of elections and those politicians, and also corporate media, decided, you know what, maybe we need to try better to control the narrative online. Maybe we need to try better to control the narrative on Twitter. How did this happen? This was not supposed to happen. And we've been seeing them crack down more and more, since then.
Only option we have for remaining in power to continue to be able to propagandize people and keep them in a closed information system is if we start implementing systems and justifying rationale for controlling the internet every bit as rigidly as we control large standard corporate media outlets, where most views don't get into those outlets ever. Most dissidents are never heard from. And since then, this has been a progression that is now manifesting in, I wouldn't call it yet its final form, unfortunately, but a much graver one than we've seen before.
Yeah.
There's an article in the...
We're just going to go ahead and stop it there, but follow Glenn Greenwald on Twitter, because he is giving us regular updates about this situation. Well, follow him on Twitter as long as you can, as long as he has that VPN, because he's giving us updates about the situation on Twitter. But I told you guys that this was coming. And again, I don't care what your political view the political view that you have. I don't care if you're liberal, conservative, socialist, Marxist, whatever. I don't care. Nobody should be removed from these platforms. No government should shut down platforms, whether you agree with what's being said on those platforms or not. That is very scary. That is very authoritarian. And it makes me nervous. It makes me nervous for the future. Not just necessarily because of the show, but because it limits our ability to get our message out. And that is very concerning for me. So if you're not following Glenn Greenwald on Twitter, make sure you do follow him, because he's giving us updates about this in Brazil. Again, where is Lula? Very interesting. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. He ran for mayor on PB platform. Ask if he'd run B1 for, I don't know what that means, Roger. What is B1, BI for P? Oh, ballot initiative for public banks. Oh, okay. Well, Jamal doesn't come on until 6, but I'll hold that one there. Thank you for the super chat, Super Seamster. Rescue the Public, September 29th, 2024, Washington, D.C. Weinstein, Door, Stein, ? Bakersfield, California. I don't know what that is. I'll have to look that up, but thank you. Shout out to Kit is in the chat, says, hit the like button. What's going on, Kit? Dublin said, I'm glad I started watching this channel on Sundays instead of ones like Face the Nation. LOL. Funny enough, sometimes I have to watch Face the Nation for you guys so I can debunk some things. Thank you, Wasim. How could you ban X or Rumble in Brazil when Glenn Greenwald reporting got Lula out of jail? That's another thing, too. It's just, I don't know what's happening. I don't know, honey. And I've never been to Brazil, but that does speak volumes. William says VPN companies need to get in on this, offer some free services. I agree. What's going on, Mama? Where can we send you clips, Sabby? I would love to see your take on the exchange between the pitiful U.S. representative at the UN Security Council against China regarding Russia. The U.S. is embarrassing. To my email. So my email address is in the description box of all my videos. Yeah, people usually will email me clips. Or at least the link to a clip. Thank you for this too, Wasim. Another good question, why Russia bans Rumble when it has not banned RT? I have no idea. Like, these are good questions, but I have no idea why they ban Rumble. I don't know, man. Something with Rumble, I guess. Judy, well, I'm voting for Trump. They are against censorship. I'm a 81-year-old Democrat. Oh, you're a Democrat. And you're voting for Trump. That is interesting. No more. The party is corrupt. Interesting. I don't believe either party is against censorship. I've seen the Republican Party also censor certain information. It just depends on what it's about. But that is interesting that you're a Democrat and you're voting for Trump. November is going to be interesting. Thank you for the super chat, Halima. American social media companies have a pattern of regime change and coups in the global South. Tech autocracy is imperialism. Elon and Venezuela. And thank you, DC. Lula got MK Ultra in prison like the rest of them. Yeah, man, he turned out to be a disappointment. I remember I was excited about him in the beginning, but he turned out to be quite a disappointment. All right, guys, smash that like button if you haven't had a chance to do so. And if you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. We are moving on to our next story here. We're going to give a shout out here to Rania Khalek because she's been doing the damn thing. Recently, Rania Khalek had 2 discussions back to back with 2 different people, but on a similar path, okay, about Israel and Gaza, but more importantly, where they stand as a voter come November. The first clip that I want to show you is Rania Khalek, and she is interviewing Alana Hadid. Now, if I remember correctly, I believe that this is Gigi and Bella Hadid's sister. And they are talking about where they stand politically for November. You know, is she going to support Kamala Harris? They talk about that in this discussion. So Alana Hadid, she is half Palestinian. I believe her father is Palestinian. As some of you may know, Bella Hadid originally, I think it was like, I want to say a month ago, she was removed from Adidas. She had a contract with Adidas and they removed her because she stood in solidarity with the Palestinian people. Then Adidas got so much pushback online. They had to come back and apologize for that. So Bella, Alana, and Gigi, they have been very vocal about this issue. In this particular discussion, they're talking about the Democratic Party and their involvement with the genocide in Gaza. And how does Alana feel about that as someone who is half Palestinian? I think you guys need to hear this because she has a message here for Kamala Harris.
About Kamala Harris as the Democratic candidate.
God, there's so much I want to say. And I guess we have the time. I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed in her as a candidate. I'm disappointed in, staying with the Biden administration as an alternative to Biden. I think, obviously that was like their best possible scenario, but for, so many people who are asking for change, it's not much of a change. And she is really towing the line. And she showed us that at the DNC with her really horrific speech that was just felt like a knife turning in uncommitted voters, in Palestinians, in people for a ceasefire, in anti-Zionists, in a huge contingency of the Democratic Party who are asking for better and saying, hey, like, let us support you. Let us support the Democratic Party. Like, we want an alternative and something better. Give us something better. And we got a whole bunch of the same. So yeah, it was really, really disappointing to be from start to finish, and also disgusting, to be totally honest. It was like a really weird dystopian party during a genocide that we're funding and supplying weapons for. So, ugh.
So did everybody hear that? So that's Alana Hadid, who is speaking about, the disappointment that she had with Kamala Harris. And I've heard this from a number of people that thought that, well, maybe her position would be different when it comes to this particular issue than Joe Biden, only to find out, no, her position, is the same. And for people who do have question about that, all you have to do is look up their donors, and you can easily find this information on Open Secrets. That's all you have to do is look up their donors, and then you'll know where they stand on certain issues. You'll kind of figure that out on your own, how they are going to vote when it comes to particular issues if you just look at their donors. And there's another piece here I want to go into.
Yeah. And also, of course, the other thing too is this attempt to kind of like differentiate her from the Biden administration, sort of, in the sense that, like, are we really going to pretend this isn't the sitting vice president of the administration overseeing this genocide? She hasn't expressed disagreement with the policy that her boss has overseen. She's also come out and said she won't support an arms embargo. And then the general behavior, like there was all this decadence and this almost like celebrity worship at the DNC that was very surface level, just like a big performance and very empty on actual policy, except that we're just going to get more of the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then on top of that, I want to get your reaction to, and I'm sure you saw some of these sort of at this point, I think what will go down in history as pretty iconic clips from the DNC. It wasn't just Kamala Harris or like, people in power. It was also people who were attending the DNC as excited Democrats, and their reactions to some of, you know, the attendees trying to like bring attention to the genocide in Gaza. Here's one in particular that I'm certain you saw. This was DNC attendees reacting to activists, basically naming, like saying out the names, calling out the names of Palestinians who've been killed during this genocide. So I'm just going to play this clip. It's quite short. I'm sure most of the people who are watching have probably seen it.
The blood of these children on your hands. 13 years old. Sama Abu
Say it again. Say it again. Mock them again. Mock the children again. Do it again. Do it again.
18 years old. 18 years old. Yusuf Hassan.
I mean, it's just, oh, look at that guy.
Such an asshole.
Yeah, I can't be bothered. I'm going to sit there and mock the names of dead Palestinians. And then, Alana, before I get your reaction to that, I also wanted to play this other clip that really disgusted me. Here is the reaction from some Democrats from North Carolina's delegation, I think.
This one's bad.
There was a protest outside this house they were like having a party at, and the reaction was the following. I'm going to go ahead and play it. This woman who's responding to people who are upset about a genocide, literally twerking in their faces. Yeah. Like, it's so horrifying. And like, what is wrong with you? Anyways, yeah. What's your take on that?
I mean, it actually, now that I've kind of moved past the anger, the initial anger, it makes me incredibly emotional. And like, watching it again, I was like, trying not to cry. We are outside of the DNC saying, pay attention to us because your money and your support are funding the death of these people. And the reaction is to mock, to literally, I mean, if this doesn't explain what our political system is, putting your fingers in your ear and being like, la, 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 la. That's literally what American politics is responding to the genocide in Palestine. That is how that couldn't like exemplify more what is going on with specifically this administration and the Democratic Party. Obviously, we are not expecting, I think a lot of people don't understand. They're like, well, why aren't you going at the Republicans and Trump? We're not expecting anything from them, and they're not in power right now.
So I hope everybody really heard what Alana just said there, that like they're not the ones that are in power right now. They're not a part of the current administration. And also they do not expect the Republican Party to handle this issue differently. They were hopeful that Kamala Harris, moving forward with this, the Democratic Party were willing to at least make some type of change. So can everyone just stop it with that talking point? Because it drives me crazy when I hear people say, oh, why aren't you protesting against the Republicans? They are not the administration that's in power right now. They're not the administration that is complicit with the genocide right now. If Donald Trump were in office right now, we'd be protesting against him too. So just think about that for a second. But I wanted you to hear that from Alana as well.
They aren't holding the presidential and vice presidential seat. So we are going at the people who are funding the genocide right now. So, and also the party that's supposed to represent us. That's the thing. Like, that's why everyone is so upset. Most of the people who are outside of these conventions are like longtime Democrats. And so we're saying to our own party, represent us. And this is the response. The response isn't like, let us listen to you. It's, you're not sitting at the table, so you're getting eaten. That whole thing. So yeah, like we're just flabbergasted, and I'm honestly sickened. It's gross. It's horrific. And imagine doing that to people during the Holocaust. Imagine doing that to people during, Vietnam, during all of these like things that you know were wrong now. Imagine walking past people trying to call attention to it and plugging your ears. So that's what they're doing. And, you know, history is not going to be kind.
And it's very disgusting, very disgusting. And I'll also say this because I want to bring in another part as well. I just think I wanted people to hear that from someone other than me. Because people are like, oh, you say that all the time. I want you to hear it from someone who is, I mean, she's half Palestinian. I want you to hear that from them, not just me, all of the time. And I want to bring you into this clip here as well. This was at the very beginning, because this needs to be said. I want you to hear about those of us that are not willing to vote for the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, and those of us that are willing to vote third party. So listen to what Alana said here. This was at the very beginning of the video.
I couldn't bring myself to tick that box because I know what it would mean for us, and whether or not that is, and I have to say this somewhere and somehow, that doesn't mean that I support Trump. When we say that we aren't voting for Kamala, that doesn't mean we're all going out and voting for Trump. Right. I'm going to vote third party, and period.
So I wanted you guys to hear that as well, because I get tired of saying that to people, and people say, oh, what are you going to do? You're going to support Trump? No, we're going to vote third party. Now, that was the first one from Rania Khalek. So she had two back to back. And the next one here is from one of the founders of Abandon Harris. And she's asking him this question. Again, I think that a lot of people ask. And he says something here that's very powerful that I want people to kind of take home with them. Listen to what he says about whether or not to vote for Kamala or Trump. Listen to this.
I want to ask you, because, you know, this is a question that I'm sure you get often, because this is pretty much the line of defense when it comes to how Democrats respond to the idea of how, you know, not voting for Kamala Harris, is how do you respond to the whole, well, you're basically getting Trump elected by doing this, which I think is a really insidious attack line, but nonetheless, it's one that we hear a lot. So how do you respond to that line of you are helping get Trump elected, and as a result, things are just going to turn out worse for Palestinians than they already are?
And the former president prevented our family and friends and colleagues from entering America, but the vice president killed them. Madam Vice President, you killed our people. You killed human beings. If it were the case that you committed some act that we could actually negotiate with, for example, you didn't pursue a specific policy that we have disagreements about on taxes, or on some policy question about the degree and relative importance of infrastructure in particular states, well, those are technicalities. We could differ. But when you come to the value of life, this is a message to all Americans. There is no compromise. There's things we should never compromise on, because otherwise we're all unsafe. We need to have a nation and a planet that's safe. And so what we say is, when you commit genocide, our only option is to send a clear signal that it's intolerable. And so the president, and now the former president that you refer to, at Abandon Biden and now Abandon Harris, we say 4 years under any Republican is incomparable to 1 day in Gaza. That we understand fully that this struggle continues, but that we must, in our first step, punish genocide here on November 5th, and then continue with our fellow Americans all across the planet and here in the United States in the struggle against Trump. We believe all these, the two candidates at the top of the ticket here, Mr. Trump and the vice president, who really represent a single ticket, are despicable candidates. An oligopoly, a bargain, that when people say you'll bring the other, curious how they say that. They seem to describe the reality of a difference without a distinction when it comes to genocide. We will fight them all. And our first step is those who began the genocide for us to send a clear signal. And maybe I should share a personal.
We'll stop it there because I do see Jamal Green is ready to come in. But I just wanted to tell you guys, this is the problem with having a big tent, right? Sometimes it's good to have a big tent. Sometimes it's not good to have a big tent. And when you look at something like genocide, for example, the fact that the people, the majority people in the tent, or let's say the people who control the tent, are not willing to even bend, or they're not even demanding you to move mountains. They're demanding the bare minimum. And the fact that the people who control the tent are not willing to bend in order to give Palestinian people some form of self-determination, to stop killing these people, to stop occupying them, to stop oppressing them. This is the problem with the big tent. And I said it before, maybe people who feel a little bit like I do, those of us who are to the left of all of this mess, there needs to be a party. There needs to be, you can't do this through the Democratic Party. You just cannot. I don't know how many experiments we need to try for people to realize that a party that's controlled by big money is not going to let those people in that big tent really have a voice unless they go along with Democrat leadership. So people that are anti-imperialist, people who are anti-war, people who support Medicare for all, people who support a lot of those progressive or socialist parties, there needs to be a place for them. Because that place is not the Democratic Party. And that doesn't mean, and to what Alana said earlier, that doesn't mean you support the Republican Party. It means that neither one of these parties are working out for you based on your beliefs and your principles, and you have every right to vote against both of them. So shout out to Rania Khalek for doing the damn thing this weekend. All right, we're going to go ahead and bring in Jamal. All right. Okay, guys, so my next guest is Jamal Green. He is a former mayor candidate of Chicago. He's an activist, but many of you may know him from his most, I think, viral recent encounter with Roland Martin. What is going on, Jamal?
What's up? I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. You was talking some good stuff. I was like shaking my head like, come on, tell them about it. Because we got to get off this plantation, and we got to make sure that we need to be independent, and that's the reality. And because neither party represent our interests, I don't believe in capping for either side. We can go on through our time, and folks are talking about project this, project 2025. We've been living a project since 1619, and before that, and project. Jim Crow and Project Redline and the Project War on Drugs and Project, we going down the line of the things that are still going on to this day. And so the reality is I don't believe that either party represents the interests of our people. And so we should be independent and crafting an agenda to push on both parties to adopt it. If not, creating our own party, which we should have had one, or supporting third parties. So, I'm for all the smoke because they, the Jewish folks ain't got to beg them. The Asian community ain't got to beg them for an anti-Asian hate bill. We've been getting hate since the beginning of time, and we still ain't got a hate bill for black people. But the Asian people step up at one time after COVID, they get an anti-Asian bill with a snap of a finger. All other groups of people don't have to care about who is Republican and Democrat because their community's interest is going to be represented. We are the only group of people who get nothing, and yet we cap for the Democrats so much like they care about us. We got to stop it.
And speaking of people not getting anything, I really want to get your opinion about this. Yeah. California, and I know a lot of people are like, you talking about California again, Sabrina? I'm sorry. California's been in the news a lot the past couple of days. Yeah. But this happened just the other day. We got to talk about what happened at the state legislature yesterday. So I shared this and I said, oh, shit. California reparations activists are protesting because the state legislature refuses to bring their reparations bill to the floor. They're saying they have the votes. They are demanding a vote or they will not vote for Kamala Harris. So I want everybody to see this. This is what I mean about having demands. So these are the activists that showed up at the state legislature. I want you to hear what they're saying here.
The speaker needs to bring the bills up now. These are their bills. They have their names on the bills. They killing their own bills because they scared of the government. Now, listen, they gonna see this and they gonna get mad at us. They killing their own bills, then they gonna get mad at us. They killing their own bills because they scared of the government. Okay? We don't care.
We need to
Bring the goddamn bills up now.
The governor needs to understand that the world is watching California, and this is going to have a direct impact on your friend Kamala Harris, who's running for president. This is going to have a direct impact. So pull up the bills now, vote on them, and sign them.
We have
We've
the
been
votes.
waiting for over 400 years.
So Jamal,
Yeah.
I'm sure you heard about this as well. I have a couple other clips to show about this. What do you think about what she said there about, she said, we will make sure this impacts Kamala Harris as well?
It should. Listen, you know, while the Palestinian community was outside uncommitted at the DNC right here in Chicago, you know, they were slapping them in the face, wouldn't even put up a speaker to even speak on it at the DNC. And they stood outside protesting, saying that the delegates were uncommitted because they wanted her to adopt an agenda that, you know, stop weapons from going to Israel. And we should have been right next to them, right? We should have had 1,000 people saying we uncommitted too, until we get this a part of our agenda, until we get reparations a part of our agenda. It don't make no sense that we keep watching other groups of people rise up and fight while we sit back and we just vote Democrat and we don't do anything. And so I am glad to see what's happening in California, them stepping up to say, hey, y'all gonna have consequences if y'all don't pick up this agenda. That's what's supposed to happen. A vote is a transaction. I don't care that Kamala looks that she's a colored woman, or that she's a woman, or that she talks. I don't like the way she talks, but Barack Obama is what I'm really using. Is, you know, oh, he talks all nice and he has the best speeches and he looks handsome and he walks all smooth. I don't care about none of that. What I care about is, where's the policy that you are going to put in place that's going to benefit our community? And if you are not talking policy, while the racial wealth gap is continuing to enlarge, while the a border is allowing for other ethnic groups to come over and get the resources and land that was supposed to be given to us, I don't care about the symbolism. I care about how do we move forward an agenda for our people. And if you ain't talk about that, then I don't care about you. And that's how it should be.
Yeah, and here's another video here I want to show people, because they were very vocal here saying, you know, we want the vote. So you guys get the idea there. And then there's another one here I want to show people. This is actually, so Joan Sawyer, he's one of the assemblymen. It says here he's mocking Black American activists, you know, after they decided they were not bringing the reparations bill to the floor. So watch for him. You'll see him come. So that's him right there, Jamal. He's mocking so for people who don't understand what happened here, he's a member of the Congressional Black Caucus in California. The Congressional Black Caucus members went against, again, they refused to allow the bill to come to the floor for a vote. And according to the activists, they actually had the votes. Now, this has happened before in California, and it was for cow care, where they had the votes and they decided, you know, not to bring it to the floor.
And this is what they do. Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
No. This is what they do. People got to understand this. When you have, you know, folks in power like Gavin Newsom at the top, you have governors, they will not move forward legislation in the legislature unless they allow it to go forward with the language that they want it to go, the language that they want in the bill. Please understand, this is how it happens. Y'all think that people can just introduce something and the people vote for it? No, it don't go like that. The Speaker of the House, as you would know, federally, it works same way in the states where they can control what legislation hits the floor for a vote. And the reality is they're playing into the people and the powers that be with what legislation they want to come out. So the governor, Gavin Newsom, can call down to the speaker and say, hey, don't bring that bill up because I don't like that language. And if y'all ain't changing that language, then it's not coming. And then they go to the floor and they don't allow for a vote. So Democrats always talk this democracy stuff. They always talk Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. They always use these words, democracy, whether it be in fear or in hope. But democracy is not happening at the state level or the federal level, because when folks want democracy and they want to vote for something, they want to hold their held accountable their politicians to vote for something, they're not allowed to even vote for it because there is no democracy. It's a dictatorship by the governor and the Speaker of the House where they can move forward whatever bills they want to. So we got to stop allowing them to play us in our face and say, if you believe in democracy, then move forward the bill and let's hold accountable to folks to vote for it.
That's right. And they named names. And I shout out here to Gia for naming the names. So you guys know who you can point your fingers at. Reggie Jones Sawyer doesn't support Black people. Mia Bonta doesn't support Black people. Jim Cooper doesn't support Black people. And Lori D. Wilson doesn't support. These are the people. So they did lose. It says here, Chris, who's one of the organizers, we lost the battle to create a reparations agency and fund, but we will win the war. Thank you to everyone who rode into battle with us. So to the point that you made there about Gavin Newsom, that's what people need to understand. And I think somebody needs to run against Gavin Newsom. You can run against him outside of the two-party city.
No, he real mad. He real mad because he ain't president. And, I heard he was throwing dirt on Kamala name because he's mad. He wanted to be the presidential nominee. And now that isn't happening. He's back in California wreaking havoc.
Well, I think that's interesting. I think someone should run against him outside the two-party system. And I think it needs to be someone that has name recognition to run against Gavin Newsom. And they could make an ad against him and say, Gavin Newsom wouldn't allow reparations bill to come to the floor. Is Gavin Newsom against reparations? They should make it like that. This ad is sponsored by such and such. But somebody needs to run against him because this is it's not just reparations. They did this to CalCare, where again, they had all the votes and they said, no, don't bring it to the floor. But to your point about other issues coming before this, and I brought this up on Friday evening, the bill to send $150,000 down payment. For homes.
For immigrants. It's utterly sickening. It's what's going on in Chicago. Trust me. That bill might be coming to Illinois soon, and we're gonna have to fight for it. We're the most progressive on a lot of these issues as well. Right after California, we literally are number 2 or 3. And so, why we have such a huge migrant crisis? We're a sanctuary state and a sanctuary city, with Chicago being a sanctuary city. And so, we have folks coming across the border, coming to Chicago, getting instant resources each and every day. We have $1 billion deficit right now in the city of Chicago, while we have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on the city level, $500 million in last year, on the state level, hundreds of millions, the county level. So over the last year, we spent $1.something billion on this situation. And yet look at California. Now they spent billions and now they're about to give them homes to folks that, come across the border, while the folks that are right here in the communities that are starving, the homeless people, y'all removing all these homeless encampments out there. Gavin Newsom want to look like he removing homeless encampments. He's doing all these different political plays while those very people need the ability to own a home. Those very people need the services that they need. And yet, instead of provide millions of dollars so that you can attack the services of the people, the citizens who have paid taxes and just maybe fallen on hard times now, you would rather give that money to folks who come across the border. This is, they don't prioritize us. And that's why we got to hold them accountable for it.
And this is something you tried to explain to Roland Martin on Twitter, who is, he's a Democrat shill. And I feel like, you're in Chicago, you ran for mayor of Chicago. There's been a lot of criticism towards Brandon Johnson from people in the Black communities in Chicago because,
he's the worst mayor we ever had.
Yeah, they're like, where you get all these resources from all of a sudden? I heard the same thing. People don't talk about it as much, but also in Boston, in Roxbury neighborhood, it's happening here too. Right. And the governor and the mayors have reached out to the Biden administration and said, we can't keep doing this. We need help. We need resources, etc. And Black people are mad here too. So I think the thing is that people like Roland Martin, I feel like it's not that he doesn't get that. I feel like he's paid not to get that.
Of course. Of course. He's a paid Democratic shield. There's nothing that he says that is criticizing or against the Democratic Party because they don't allow him to. That's how he gets his ad money and able to pay his bills. And so the reality is I'm okay with that. If you want to be a Democratic paid shield, do that. Just leave the independent voices alone. I did nothing to Roland Martin, but utilize my platform to do what I'm doing. I'm not talking about what you're doing. So why are you coming to criticize me and my voice? You know why? It's because they pay him to try to overshadow the independent voices because they don't want the independent voices who are criticizing both sides, especially the Democratic Party, to gain traction on social media and on media. And so it's up to him to stump on our voices, and they're paying him to do that. You can't stump on my voice because I'm coming strong. And just like I told him, when you get to Chicago, we can have this conversation in person. But when I saw him, he put a woman in front of him and didn't say one word. But the reality is don't play with us because I'm actually on the ground here and I'm actually doing the work in my communities. And you just sitting on your little TV show criticizing me and everybody else. So we have to understand the independent voices is what matters. If it's not folks like us stepping up to say these things, then you got folks like Roland Martin who gonna act like he speak for Black folks and continue to sell us out. We gotta have the independent voices, or you just gonna have to pay shields. Enough is enough for us to be sitting on the sidelines. We need to be in leadership, and our agenda need to be out front for the people and for our people.
And you have done a lot for people in the community because one of the things I knew about you is that you fought against Citibank. Can you tell everybody a little bit about that?
Chase Bank.
Chase Bank.
Yep. So we fought Chase Bank because they're still redlining to this day. And Chase Bank being one of the largest banks in the country, actually the largest bank, worth several trillions of dollars. They were only lending to South and West sides of Chicago 1.9% of the time. We stood up. If you know Chicago, it's very segregated. So where Black people are, where Latinos are. It's the most segregated city in the country. And so they intentionally, the South and West sides, which are all minority communities, they intentionally did not invest there, and they invested more into white communities. And they showed that the default ratings were the same. They showed that people had the credit to buy homes. They showed all of the data to prove that there was no reason but redlining that that of the reason why they only lended to the South and West sides 1.9% of the time. And so Chase, they banned me from every Chase in America. We shut down over 35 branches every day. Just to show Chase, you can't have these branches in our neighborhoods if you don't want to pour money into our communities. And they came to the table and promised $1 billion back to Chicago and thanked me many months later. But I'm still banned from every Chase. But still, so we can't allow these financial institutions, these politicians that are redlining us with our resources. We gotta step up and stand up against them. And stand on business, and our Black men must do that. And I'm trying to lead the way for that.
I always have a lot of respect for people that are out there on the ground that are organizing, the activists, and not just like on camera, like that kind of thing, because that is where the real work is getting done, you guys. And like a lot of the stuff you just don't. A lot of the things that happen you don't see on camera, like even like we do mutual aid over at RBN. A lot of those things you just don't see it because it's we're out on the ground and stuff like that. But I think that this is the type of thing that we need to push and promote. And so for me, when I hear people say, well, what do you expect people to do? Are they just supposed to cave to the Republicans or cave? And I'm like, I think you're looking at this again from the wrong perspective, because you are still expecting a politician to come and save you.
There you go.
Instead of doing the work on the ground and organizing. I think a lot of people just don't want to get their hands dirty and get out on the ground and do the work.
That's because they too busy worried about their 9-to-5 job and their comfortable lives. That was the worst thing that they could have done, was mentally enslave us and utilize, these little jobs to make us comfortable and think that we got something. It was the worst thing they could have done us, because we became comfortable, complacent, and the racial wealth gap only got larger. And the home ownership rate in our communities have never changed in the last 50 years. It's still the all-time low, and lower than any other ethnic group. So we are literally in a fight for our lives, and we got too many people sitting back comfortable. No, you're not thinking about your kids and the next generations and how they're going to be affected. You too busy trying to figure out how you could just keep on paying your regular bills and not care about anyone else. We got to get out of this the individual mindset and be more communal and understand that we have to do what we have to do to fight for our communities and our children and our children's children. And that means that we got to do more, whether that is going out to make sure that we fighting for reparations, whether it's going out to mentor, going on your block and organizing your block club and mentoring other youth. We all have a part to play. Me or be Jamal and go shut down banks, and force them to give back to the community. You can do anything. It's just about doing something. And we become too complacent, and they're able to just give us turkeys and give us a few dollars at the job, and we happy. No, our kids are going to be at a disadvantage if we do not fight for them, and we all need to right now.
That's right. All right, Jamal, I know you have a hard stop. I know you got other things to do, but I haven't been to Chicago in a couple of years. I still have to come back, and I have to stay longer than 2 days, because last time I was there for 2 days.
No, please come. I'd love to show you around too. And thank you for what you do and the voice that you are uplifting, because we need that independent voice, and we need it to keep uplifting those who are speaking out for us. What you can be doing in your community is you could be building cultural foundation. You could be trying to figure out how we can raise better children and work on us. Get out of this two-party mindset. They do this during campaign season. Right now, we need to be focusing on us. Not a Republican or a Democrat has ever saved you. There's never been a president that has moved forward legislation to change your life. Stop allowing them to fool you with Trump is a threat to democracy, and we got to spend all our time trying to get him, make sure he don't get to the White House. If Trump wins, you're going to be fine, because he was in there for 4 years, and you can't tell me one right that he took away from you, because he didn't take away any. So if he wins, he got 4 years. If Kamala wins, she got 4 years. The reality is your life is not going to drastically change unless you change it. In your communities, where you are, on your block, with your children, we all have to focus on rebuilding communities. Get out of this Republican Democrat stuff, because it don't matter who's in there. Your life gonna be pretty much the same in 4 years if you don't make it different.
Awesome. Jamal Green, thank you so much. Where can people follow you?
They can go everywhere. Jamal Green on Twitter, Facebook, and ain't hard to find me at JAYMAL Green on social media, and at JA''MAL Green on Facebook. Thank you so much for all that you do, and I can't wait to come back on your show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys, that was Jamal Green. Again, please make sure you follow him on Twitter. Very young activist, incredibly smart organizer, out there in the community. I love to see it. And you guys need to see and hear more of that. Jamal has a busy day today, so he'll come back on another time and we can spend more time together. I have another guest coming on as well that you know very well, especially you're over with us at RBN. JB Font in the house. We have to talk about something, you guys, because like I said, one of you sent me this video. JB and I both of us watched this video, the Bernie to Trump pipeline. So we're going to break this down together as a duo, the way we do on the Sabby and JB show. What is up, JB? What's up, fam?
What's good, Sabs? Good to see you. Good to see everybody here on this beautiful Sunday evening. I get to spend the Sunday evening with my homie. That's what's up. I'm so happy.
Yeah. All right, let's do it. Let's do it, JB. Let's dive in. Let's do it. So, okay, so there is this phenomenon, I guess it's called the Bernie to Trump pipeline. And one of you sent me this video. I just want to start with this article from The Hill this is April 8th of 2020, and then we'll jump into the video. So at one point, apparently, Trump urged Sanders supporters to join the GOP after Senator, Bernie Sanders suspended his campaign. So just apparently that happened. I don't remember that happening, but this is from April 2020. And it says President Trump on Wednesday urged Sanders supporters to join the Republican Party after the independent Vermont senator announced he was suspending his bid for a Democratic presidential nomination. He also thanked Elizabeth Warren, reiterating his belief that she may have taken away enough votes from Sanders on Super Tuesday to cost him the states. And he says, Bernie Sanders is out. Thank you, Elizabeth Warren, or thank you to Elizabeth Warren. If not for her, Bernie would have won almost every state on Super Tuesday. This ended just like the Democrats and the DNC wanted, same as the crooked Hillary fiasco. The Bernie people should come to the Republican Party trade. So apparently that did happen. I don't know many people that did that. Do you, JB? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I was trying to be responsible. But no, I don't know anybody who actually did that. In fact, most people actually just acquiesced and went along with voting for Joe Biden. So they really just didn't see any way that they can vote for Trump, because Trump was really kind of the opposite side, the antithesis of a Bernie Sanders.
Right. Like I said, I don't know many people that did that. Maybe like one or two. I think one or two people I know did that or said they were considering doing that. Well, that leads to the video here that was sent my way. Kyle Kulinski talked about the Bernie to Trump pipeline. And again, JB and I both have watched this, and you have different things to add than I do. So I want to make sure, that's why I wanted to make sure you come on too, because you noticed things that I did not notice. So let's go ahead and get started, and I'll pause in between.
Sanders back in the day to Donald Trump now. People that come to mind, Jimmy Dore, Matt Taibbi. He had a tweet the other day where he said, every time somebody calls me racist, sexist, or, whatever, fill in the blank, I'll donate $1 to Trump. High profile media figures who have effectively gone from Bernie Sanders back in the day to Donald Trump now. People that come to mind, Jimmy Dore, Matt Taibbi. He had a tweet the other day where he said, every time somebody calls me racist, sexist, or, whatever, fill in the blank, I'll donate $1 to Trump. And then you have Russell Brand, of course. He also sort of took this path. And the first point I want to make in reaction to this is that what the consistent trend you see through all of these people who did this is that these are either politician types, right? So like high profile people who have a name in the public, like Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr., or like, you can say activist-y too, that's RFK Jr., or they're media figures like Jimmy Dore, Matt Taibbi, Russell Brand, comedians, talk show hosts, investigative or independent reporters or journalists or whatever you want to call somebody like Matt Taibbi. And this phenomenon is not nearly as common among regular people, among working people, among the voting population. And in fact, there's data to sort of back this up. So, for example, in 2016, only 12% of Bernie supporters who voted for him in the primary ended up voting for Trump in the general election. 12%. Now, you might hear that and say, well, I mean, look, that's 1 out of 10. That's a pretty high number. But you have to compare it to others. So, for example, 28% of Hillary Clinton supporters who were with her in the 2008 primary over Barack Obama, 28% of them ended up voting for McCain in the general election, right? So we're talking more than double. And the other point to make is when it comes to RFK Jr. and when it comes to Tulsi Gabbard in particular, these are people who, that yeah, they supported Bernie in 2016, but they supported Joe Biden in 2020, right? And, you know, you don't see much of people saying, this is the centrist to right-wing pipeline because these people supported Biden in the most recent election and now they're supporting Trump. So nobody says like centrist to right-wing pipeline, but you could probably dig up just as many examples, if not more examples statistically, of people who were more centrist type liberals who then end up going to the right. So that's the first point, okay, that this is more of an issue among high profile individuals, media figures, activists, politicians. It seems to happen more with them than it does among the regular voting population, right?
JB, I want to chime in here for a second and I'll bring it back.
Well, you know, I'm going back to what I said last night after we had first initially watched this, because as I was watching, I was tweeting back at you. I was just like, this is some interesting takes here. And so here's what I said. I said, I think the reason why some of these people swing far into the other direction is because they actually went further. If they actually went further left, they risk losing money and status. It's less of an ideological shift and more of a self-preservation move to keep the system in place with some populist ideas. So it's really just, if they actually went further to where we're at, they're not going to really make money, ultimately.
Yeah, I think to JB's point, I think and he gets into the money thing a little bit in this video, but I think one of the things that people have to understand, particularly on YouTube, okay, particularly on YouTube, because the algorithm favors the duopoly. So if you are pushing the Democratic Party or you're pushing the Republican Party, the algorithm is going to favor you. It doesn't mean you have to, like, you don't even have to necessarily be great at what you do, but the algorithm is going to favor you because you're still keeping people within the two-party system.
Yeah.
Whereas like people like me and JB that supported Bernie Sanders, after Bernie was done with his campaigns, we actually moved further to the left. So for us, what we do doesn't favor the algorithm because we're not promoting the Democrat candidate. So we're not promoting Kamala and say vote for her. We're not promoting Trump and say vote for him. So because we're saying, okay, we're supporting, Jill Stein, leave the duopoly, let's focus more on what we can get done on the ground. The algorithm doesn't work for that in the same way. So for those of us that move further to the left after Bernie, we actually don't benefit from that system. No. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah, well, I mean, it really is, the way we believe is antithetical to corporate interests. And corporate interests align with either the Democrat or Republican parties. So it's like Bernie was as far left as you can go while still being acceptable. And it's like, okay, well, if we can't go Bernie, we can't go centrist because then our cover's blown. So we got to go as far to the right as we possibly can. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, because that's the impression that I got from people too, because people have moved, people have evolved. And I think that if you started a show during Bernie's 2016 campaign, or even like right before that, then you were definitely able to benefit from this from this space because Bernie ran twice in a row. So you had Bernie waves twice in a row. And myself and JB, like, we didn't start until 2021. So we came in after all of that. And after the algorithm changed again to heavily suppress independent media. So the only way that I think a lot of you found us is you saw us on other people's shows. Like that's kind of how we were able to get the word out for the most part. But yeah, you guys will notice this, like, interviewing third party candidates, like those interviews would never get as many views as like someone interviewing like a Democrat candidate or a Republican candidate. It's just a reality. Like if JB brought on Donald Trump tomorrow, you know, JB doesn't have 1 million subs like Kyle, but I bet you that interview would get like a lot of freaking views because again, that benefits the algorithm. Absolutely. You know. Okay, let's go back in.
So it's not as much of an ironclad rule. It's not as much of a trend as you would think based off these high profile examples. Okay. Now, having said that, why are these people doing what they're doing? What's with their political transformation? Well, look, I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I think there are a number of answers to it. So first of all, I do sense that with a lot of these people, there's this contrarianism to the mainstream, right? They feel like, I'm going to be different. I'm going to be contrarian. If I feel like, mainstream media or popular culture is going in one direction, I'm going to be a sore thumb and I'm going to stick out and I'm going to be contrarian. There's also some semblance of like edginess gets eyeballs, right? There's a sense of if I do this, I'm being edgy. With some of these characters, I think this is undeniable, especially when it comes to people like RFK and Tulsi Gabbard, where they basically burn their bridges on the Democratic side. So there's this element of careerism and opportunism where they try to stay relevant. If your team turns on you, well, then to stay relevant, you don't have a future on the Democratic side anymore. That's obvious because they despise you. So what do? They do the logical thing from a career and opportunistic perspective, which is, all right, maybe the other side will welcome me with open arms. If I start being the voice that says, I'm a leftist and Trump is right about everything. And then the other thing, for the media figures in particular, of course, I think a big factor here is,
can we pause for a second? What do you think about what the thing there about Tulsi and RFK? I mean, I think you and I mentioned this before, JB. Tulsi was always kind of opportunist.
Yeah, as far as the opportunist, from what Kyle said about they're trying to be contrarian in order to, garner more favor in either one direction or another, or really to gain more notoriety. The contrarian that he's speaking about is really from, it's really through a propagandist lens because ultimately, if I go either full progressive Democrat or full MAGA, you're still within that system, right? You're still not. It's contrarian. Like, oh my God, he went full MAGA. Oh my God, they went full lib. But to be honest with you, the biggest contrarians that I know of is you, me, RBN, many people who are said, bump the two-party system. We're going third party. Right? Those are to me, the real contrarians, because the ones who the Democrats and Republicans fear, to be honest with you, are the third parties. They don't care if you stay home, to be honest with you. Because the more people that stay home, then it's like, all right, then we only got this small group of people. That's fine. We can just, pick ourselves between that pool. But if you start going third party and more people start going third party, that's why they're doing a lot of the lawsuits against them and trying to get them off the ballots and stuff like that, because that's the fear. The fear is people actually making a choice outside of the two parties that they set for you. And so when he talks about being contrarian, I don't see it that way. But from people who are locked into the duopoly, it seems that way.
I agree. I hear you there. Okay, here we go.
Look, they generating clicks. You want to generate clicks. And this is a lane that is clearly very profitable. I think right-wing voters they love the idea of a transition story, right? Not involving trans people, of course, but they love the idea of a political transition story of like, I was with them, but now I'm with you, and I can tell you all the inner workings of the other side and how evil and bad and wrong and nefarious they are because I was in the belly of the beast. We saw this with Dave Rubin, for example. I think that's a big part of it. I think just generating clicks, and then also connected to that is eventually audience capture, right? Eventually audience capture. I remember a while ago, there was a video where Jimmy Dore, now remember, his posture for a very long time is like, look, I'm a lefty and I'm to the left of the Democrats and I'm going to criticize the Democrats from their left. For a long time, that was his shtick. And I remember he released a video where he was criticizing the Biden administration because at that time, there were some really bad videos coming out of the southern border where like the Border Patrol were beating the shit out of, you know, people trying to cross the border or whatever it was, or it had something to do with somebody on a horse or whatever. The details are kind of irrelevant.
I think he's talking about the Haitian. Remember when the Haitian migrants were coming across the border, JB?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they were beating them with the, yeah.
But he did a video basically saying like, look at this. Look at how extreme this is. You know, the Democrats are exactly like Trump. This is not the way to go about the border. And then when you look at his comment section, he got way more dislikes than he normally would on the video. And when you read his comment section, since he had been bashing the Democrats so much for so long, his comment section was just full of right-wingers who in this instance were like, no, fuck those immigrants. The Border Patrol is right, and you're wrong, Jimmy. And then from then, he didn't mention the border for a very long time because he knew it pissed off his audience. And then the next time he did end up bringing up the border, all of a sudden now he's a border hawk, right? And he wants to crack down on the border. And it's not the left-wing criticism that in the past he would have made. And so I think that's a perfect example of audience capture.
So what do you think about that, JB, the whole thing about audience capture? Because one thing I will say is I think that particularly for whatever reason, and I don't know why it is, maybe just because they have more money, for whatever reason, it does seem like a lot of the right wing like commentators, like a Candace Owens, but not even just Candace Owens. I mean, just like a lot of them, it does seem like for whatever reason, they are pushed out in the algorithm a lot more, right? But I will say with the clickbait stuff, though, I think everybody in this space tries to use, I don't want to say trendy, but titles that really capture your attention, right? Or thumbnails that capture. I think all of us tried to do that. But I will say, I think that, well, let me go ahead and get your point first and I'll come back.
I feel like Kyle is lacking some self-awareness right now. Because, yeah, so he can point to some people, for instance, like Jimmy, who was on the left, and then it seemed like he swung, in the other direction. Kyle did the same thing. He just didn't swing as far. Because if you look at, a lot of the tweets and things like that, he was cheering on Biden. He may have not have voted for him, but in a sense, through his rhetoric online, things like that, he was co-signing. So in a way, you feel like it's like, yeah, you can say that about Jimmy, but you also are doing the same thing. And that's what it feels like Kyle's kind of doing. And that's honestly, I feel like it's kind of hypocritical for him to point it out and not say, I kind of did the same thing. Because the thing is, like, he was with Bernie, which was to the left, and now he seems to be more going kind of veering towards the center in that way. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but that's from.
I feel like a lot of them have moved to this. So, like, for example, when you say that people move, when he says that people move to the right, I feel like all of them did that. All of them may not have moved towards like Trump. But let me explain what I mean by moving to the right, people. Like, if you were supporting Bernie Sanders and you said that, you can't, I remember Kyle saying he couldn't support Joe Biden because he couldn't vote for someone who voted for the Iraq war. Remember that, JB? So I remember him saying like he couldn't, that's why he didn't vote for Joe Biden. But if you were supporting Bernie Sanders and then, Joe Biden wins, becomes president, and all of a sudden you start, calling Biden Dark Brandon or whatever the hell it was, the nicknames they were giving him. And now you pulled back because of like the genocide and said, no, we can't do this. You endorsed or gave your support publicly to her face, to Jill Stein. And then the moment Kamala was announced as the nominee, then you decided to jump on board with the Kamala thing. So if you went from Bernie Sanders, who had is basically a social democrat and had progressive policies, to Kamala Harris, you did move to the right. Just like if you supported Bernie Sanders and you said, well, this isn't going to work out, I'm going to support Hillary Clinton, you did move to the right. You didn't go to the far right, but you still did move right.
Yeah.
So why am I saying that? This is important because, again, when you think about the algorithm, it is a lot more profitable if you go along with the centrist Democrat lane. You can look at someone like David Pakman and you see that this works. You can look at someone like TYT and you see that it works. Granted, TYT, they'll start off telling you support the progressive, but then they always seem to pivot right back to the centrist in the end, when the progressive, who usually was Bernie Sanders, did not win the nomination. They would go back to, you got to support that neoliberal candidate. That is moving to the right. So I think that's still to the right. So I think that's the thing I want people to understand. Whereas, like, I think people like me and JB, we move further to the left.
Yeah. And the thing is like, there may be some people who they will say they are on the left, but then if you start making more excuses for someone who is still within the duopoly, you're still keeping people in the same system. And the problem is that we need to leave the system. You know what I'm saying? Because people can say, well, I'm sick and tired of the Democratic Party and how they're, sheep herding people into it in order to lead them down the wrong path. But at the same time, going the other direction to just vouch for Republicans is also a fool's errand as well.
Right. Okay, let me bring this back in here.
Where now you realize, okay, I've crafted this audience for myself and I need to feed them what they want to hear, right? So that's another example of why they end up taking this path. The other thing is, look, with a lot of these people, they have taken anti-establishment politics. They've taken that kind of thinking to the extreme of now believing that anything that's the opposite of the establishment is correct by default, right? So one good example of this is, like, every lefty you'd meet is going to be anti-big pharma because of the profit margins, because of the price gouging, because, the government invests up front in the research and development to create these drugs. Then the drug companies swoop in, buy up the patent rights, and sell it back to everybody and price gouge the shit out of them. So every reasonable lefty is anti-big pharma, and they want to see reform. And, in my opinion, I want to see it nationalized, but other people might want to do more antitrust approach and, like, break up the big pharma companies. But either way, everybody on the left is, one extent or another, anti-big pharma. But with this crowd, oftentimes it goes from I'm anti-big pharma, and they cross the line into I'm just anti-modern medicine, right? Like, I'm anti-vaccine, for example. And that is the mindset of I'm so anti-establishment that now I'm just going to assume the exact opposite of whatever the establishment says. And that leads you into some pretty fucking stupid places. It leads you into thinking like alternative medicine is actually better and helps people more than proven scientific double-blind study researched medicine, because the double-blind study research medicine happens to be sold by a big pharma company. So now the criticism is no longer, hey, the medicine works, but you're price gouging people and that's bad. Now the criticism is the medicine just doesn't work and you're poisoning people on purpose, right? Another example of this thinking, taking the anti-establishment mindset to an extreme position, would be I'm against mainstream media, right? And every reasonable person on the left is, to one extent or another, against mainstream media. They think they do a poor job, etc. Profit motive is an issue, yada, yada. All that stuff is true. But they take the default opposite perspective, which is, well, actually, I think Alex Jones is much more reliable than mainstream media. And that's just fundamentally not true. In fact,
JB. That was fun. And I think, like, someone taught me this, and so I'm trying to practice using this a lot better. I stopped saying mainstream media and I started referring to it as corporate media.
Yeah.
Because it might have been you that told me, JB. I forget.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the thing is, it's like there's, to be honest with you, how many people are really watching corporate media anymore? Not as many. So what's mainstream about it? Right. We're technically, I mean, your channel is more mainstream than a lot of corporate media. But the thing is that, and I mean mainstream in the popularity and how many people watch. But the thing is like, yeah, some of them may swing in the direction, and or some of them are going in a direction where they feel burned, and so they go in the opposite direction, just because they don't want to go in that direction anymore because, you know, they've been harmed in some way. Unfortunately, it's not always the best course of action. Although I will say in regards to, and I'm not going to get a whole lot of detail here because I got to be careful. But I mean, the thing is like Big Pharma, yeah, they have some issues. And yes, we should also looking into Eastern medicine and all their alternative forms of medicine. But that's part of the system that they a lot of times don't talk about. It's about the capitalist system in itself, where they don't take, where the profit is the issue. The profit is what's the problem. And a lot of times they always skirt around that issue and say, well, the globalists and big corporations. And it's like, yeah, but ultimately you got to name the problem. It is capitalism. And that's what's the biggest issue. And a lot of times some people, they're too afraid to actually name the problem because they don't want to be labeled a socialist, a communist. And the thing is, it's like, oh, you're just giving the problem a true face and a true name to what it really is.
I agree with you, JB. I think that's a big part of it, is just like, you know, the problem with capitalism that we run into and stuff like that. But I think that I think he had a point there when he said like it leads to people saying, oh, Alex Jones is correct because da-da-da. And it's like, just because, so the way that I look at it is like, just because you're against corporate media, that doesn't mean that everybody that's independent is right or correct. Because I've seen some people like pushing like Nick Fuentes and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, look, bruh, that don't mean, you know, it's like the guys that say, really the guys like in college and stuff like that. Like the guys, like a guy would say something like that he is attracted to, you know, taller women or something like that. I don't know. What do guys usually say? Like maybe boobs or something, or I don't know. But let's say he's attracted to more petite women. He likes petite women. And then it's so like, as a friend, like every petite woman that you see, you just like, what about her? What about her? What about, and the guy says, I said I was attracted to women that are petite. That doesn't mean I like every damn petite woman. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like that. Like that doesn't mean everybody that's independent is correct and you should push them, because some people say some really crazy shit.
Look at you using the analogies. I love it.
I'm trying.
Yeah. You can also say kind of like, you can also vary it by, you know, and I don't care. Like, JB, you're a gay man. Do you like every single male that you see? And it's like, hell no. Nah. Do you see me thirsting after Alex Jones? The hell is wrong with you? You know, and that's the same thing. It's like, I don't like every dude that I see, right? And it's the same thing. It's like asking a guy who's heterosexual, it's like, do you like every single woman that you see? You know, it's like, no. It's the same thing when it comes to looking at independent media. It's like, who has the most objective analysis? And everybody's going to have a bias some way, in some shape or form. But the thing is that bias rooted in objectivity? Is that bias rooted in, in his accurate historical analysis, dialectical materialism? If they don't, then it's like, you got to leave them to the side. And some people, they go so far in the opposite direction, you got to leave them to the side.
Yeah. No, it's true. Okay, we'll come back in here.
It's one of the dumbest fucking things I've ever heard in my life. If you look at the accuracy rate of the stuff mainstream media says versus Alex Jones, mainstream media is going to be right a way higher percentage of the time than fucking Alex Jones, who's a liar. Right? I mean, this guy literally says he thought Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama are literal demons, and one of them smells like sulfur, and look, a fly landed on Barack Obama, therefore he's fucking Baphomet or whatever. The shit he says. And then provably untrue things, provably untrue things, and people just act like, no, we don't need to fact check him. He just let him do his thing. And then what they do is take the kernels, the rare instances where he's right, and go, see, he's more trustworthy than mainstream media. That's taking anti-establishment politics to the dumbest possible conclusion, because your default perspective is the establishment must be wrong in all circumstances. And then beyond that, with some of these characters, not with all of them, with some of them, I think there's an element of accelerationism, right? The idea that, hey, in order to get left-wing victories, you have to burn it all down to build something fresh and new. And then if that is your perspective, you could see how somebody who's nominally on the left would take the position, well, Trump will lead to the system burning all down faster, and we could have a revolution after that and fix everything. Therefore, we're going to go in that direction. But again, I think that's just accelerationism. I think is just an idiotic position. I think there's...
I haven't heard anybody say that Trump would do that. Have you, JB?
No, I'm going to be... look, I won't be honest with you. Maybe if some of y'all who are nominally on the left actually listen to those of us who are actually on the left, then, we could actually get somewhere. But you guys keep voting for the duopoly. You guys keep voting for Democrats and keep us going into the other direction. So therefore, really, the accelerationists are people like Kyle Crystal, Sam Cedar, and all those. They're actually the accelerationists, because the thing is that they're actually keep pushing us to a party that keeps, ticking over towards the right. So what's the point? Like, the thing is like, and plus accelerationism, the problem is that most people, like, I don't see them fighting as hard when there's a Democrat in office.
No, and I think the thing is like when you do go along with the establishment candidate instead of the progressive candidate that you were rooting for, I think what ends up happening is you still in turn end up pushing your audience to further to the right as well. Because now you went from you support people that have corporate money, take corporate money. That was a big one, right? Don't support people that take corporate money, which makes sense. Medicare for all is a litmus test, that kind of thing. So if you go from that to, okay, let's just go ahead and support someone like Kamala Harris. Now you're pushing your audience to support someone who does take corporate money and does not approve of Medicare for all. So you also are moving your audience further to the right. David Pakman was the first one that I saw do this. That was a progressive. He was like diehard progressive at first, and then he slowly kind of moved his audience over towards that centrist, like Democrat lane. Next thing I knew, he was sitting in office rooms with Kamala Harris, like dead serious. Like Brian Tyler Cohen is another one that you will see. So like, I do feel like when we talk about even his show, Secular Talk has changed too. I remember when I felt like that show used to be further left, less like establishment, and then it was like, as time went by, it just over the past, since I would say 2021, it started going further to, okay, well, let's just kind of go along with the establishment Democrats. Whereas when Biden was running in 2020, he said he couldn't vote for him because he voted for the Iraq War. But now you're pushing people to support a candidate that's a part of the administration that's complicit with genocide. So I think you're moving that audience to the right as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And as far as, Kyle goes, I feel like the lack of self-awareness there. It's like, dude, you have been moving further to the right, and you call it just trying to stave off fascism, when in reality you're staving off fascism by moving closer to it. Is that the logic here? If we really want to stave off fascism,
all of them did it. All of them did it though. All of them that had the shows during like the Bernie wave, all of them moved over, like they moved with the time. Like if you think about it, except for, we came in after all of that, right? So, and we're telling people, well, let's get out of this two-party system. Let's like try to build a third party movement. Let's try to do that kind of thing. And we were activists. So I was an activist before I even started. We started this YouTube stuff. And so then we're pointed to as grifters when they make more money than we do. I'm like, the model that you're doing, the model that Kyle does, and the model that Kyle and Jimmy and all them do, that makes way more money than what we make. So, but people point at us and call us the grifters. Like, I'm not a millionaire. Are you?
Hell no. But
so,
well, I mean, my point is, it's like, if I don't want to get burned, then how is moving inching closer towards the fire going to get me less burn? Because that fire is still going to burn me. So shouldn't I be going the complete opposite direction away from the fire? The problem is that they say, well, if we go the opposite direction of the fire, we're going towards the fire. But the thing is, we're going the opposite direction. I don't see like how that is, that math is mathing when you run away from the fire. And the problem is they keep trying to say, oh, well, you're running in a circle. And it's like, no, because the thing is that the far left is completely different from the far right. And the thing is, it's like that horseshoe theory, honestly, pardon my French, but it's bullshit. Because it's not. Because the thing is, it's like people who are on the far left, honestly, do not actually want, you know, as authoritarian as what people think they are. People who think that have a revisionist history that was taught to them by the people who don't want you to go further left. That's the problem.
Right. And I'll play this little part here, and then I'll wrap it up.
Zero evidence for it whatsoever. When Republicans get in there and they make things worse, usually what happens is that drags the Democrats further to the right on the spectrum, and things keep getting worse and worse and worse. It's never the case that, oh, it got so bad that everything collapsed and now we can create a socialist utopia out of that. That doesn't fucking happen. All the evidence you need is during the George W. Bush administration, right? Started 2 illegal wars, did tax cuts for the rich, dragged the spectrum to the right. And it wasn't so bad that everything collapsed and then the Democrats came in and ushered in a utopia. No, it just dragged the Democrats further to the right. And you see the same thing under the Trump administration. It's just not a correct theory to say, let's go for the worst candidate so everything implodes, then we'll magically build something new and fresh and it'll work even better. That never fucking happens. That never happens. And then finally, and this is probably the biggest factor, I saved it.
The thing is that he's arguing and thinking that by sticking with the Democrats is going to keep us in a more progressive direction, when in reality, the reason why we got to the Iraq war with George W. Bush is because they're doing exactly what they're doing right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
For the end, why do these people do what they do? Why do they end up taking the positions they end up taking? Why did they effectively go from a Bernie Sanders supporter to a Donald Trump supporter? This answer is very straightforward. They hate liberals. They hate liberals. They hate Democrats. And that is, honestly, in many instances, the core of a lot of these people's politics. They just have a seething hatred for liberals and Democrats. Now, look, here's the thing. And I'd be curious to know what Bernie thinks about this. Because Bernie Sanders, he always was the kind of politician where he would take a lot of time shitting on the Republicans and their policies and saying how bad the policies are, right? And talking about the substantive issues. But there were many instances with Bernie Sanders rallies and speeches and interviews where Bernie would levy reasonable and strong-worded criticism against fellow Democrats, right? He would go after fellow Democrats for basically agreeing too much with the Republicans, doing neoliberal policies instead of progressive policies. And I think what happened with a lot of these characters who went from Bernie to Trump is they hyper-focus on Bernie's criticism of Democrats. And then they end up doing the same thing, but that's like all of their commentary and all of their thought process is, look at how fucking terrible the Democrats are. And they don't do what Bernie does, where Bernie, you know, pairs that together with clearly explaining the Republicans are even worse. They're even more extreme. Here's the fucked up things they do. But I do have some criticism for my side, for the Democratic side. These people just take the criticisms that Bernie made against Democrats, and that becomes their whole politics.
We can go ahead and stop it there. One thing I will say is I do understand some of that, like some of what he's saying there towards the end. Like sometimes there's too much focus just on the Democrats and not as much on the Republicans, or there's no focus on the Republicans too. I do understand some of that. I have seen that myself. That being said, I do think that we need to start reframing this in a different way. And I think this whole focus on the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, I think We need to go back to focusing on top down. We need to go back to focusing on the top and the bottom. And that was something that Bernie did 2016, which I think appealed to a lot of people, was focusing on the top and the bottom, like the billionaires, that top 0.1%. That resonates with a lot of people, with the majority of people, because the majority of us are not billionaires. The majority of us are not millionaires either. So I think that does resonate with a lot of people. And I think that's what we need to do, instead of so much of the focus of this person is right wing, this person is, this kind of thing and all that. And I think we need to focus on, because if you take it back to that, focusing on that top versus bottom, then a lot of those other policies that Bernie talked about and that we support, that all will just fall into play. Because when you're focusing on who's at the top and how much money they got, then you realize what you could actually have in this country if we had an equal distribution of wealth, if we had a fair economic system, which we don't. That kind of thing. You start to realize what you could have. But I think the constant, like this whole discussion of like the Bernie to the Trump pipeline, again, like I said, I don't know many people that did that, but like whether it's commentators, but also people on the ground, like the organizers and stuff like that. Most people I know did not do that. But I think that, again, if people did do that, they probably did that because of the economic reasons. They probably did that because they're like some people, the people that are really upset about the economy right now, there are a number of people that told me they're Democrats and they're going to support Donald Trump because of the economy alone. Just because of the economy. So that, I think that's probably what's pushing like everyday people in that direction, if they, fall on that path. I think when it comes to the media personalities, I think a big part of it is, I think, there's some click stuff that happens there. I mean, you and I know this, JB, like obviously you want to make sure that your videos are eye catching. I think we all got better with thumbnails along the way. But I think that when he talks about audience capture, I will say, I do think that you cannot be afraid to talk about certain things because you're worried about what your audience is going to say. I mean, there's been times people turned on me when I went to cover that RFK announcement, when RFK was announcing he was running for president. It was here in Boston. So it was local. So I was like, hey, I should just go on the ground and cover that. So I signed up for the press pass, and I showed up there to cover it. And all these people were like so excited. Yay, RFK. And then a lot of people got mad at me because I wouldn't support him, because I wouldn't vote for him, because obviously he was terrible on Israel and Gaza. Not only that, his reparations plan wasn't a real reparations plan. So there's also that. And he flip-flopped on policing. So that's not the kind of candidate I was trying to rock with. And he was running through the Democratic Party. And I went, all this, JB. I ain't gonna go through all this. But anyway, some people got mad at me when I started to criticize RFK, and they were like, I'm unsubscribing. And I was like, bye. Like,
Bruce's. Yeah. And one of the things a lot of people don't think about is some of the people who may have went from Bernie to Trump is because they don't know of any other alternative. And that's the problem, because some of these people who we're talking about, they don't provide an adequate alternative. Or if there is an alternative, they're not good enough for them, even though they're outside of duopoly. So the thing is like, if we're going to talk about top down, sometimes when you start to think of top down, you start to look at the duopoly as, no, they're for the people at the top. We're the people at the bottom. So we have to go with people who are going to actually go along with us. So the thing is like, if they're not talking about actually top down and walking away from both parties that are trying to contribute to keeping the top on top, then you might want to scurry on to somebody else who actually is talking about the real class issues.
Yeah. And I think that, if some of these like third party candidates and stuff were given the fair attention that they needed to get, you wouldn't have these two candidates. People are like, oh, I don't want to vote for either one of them. You wouldn't have that. I really don't think you would. And more people would be aware. I try to spread as much information about, third parties and stuff as I can. But I think that the fact that Jill Stein is on as many ballots as many states as she is right now. And by the way, it's just September. The fact that she's on as many states as she is by now, I'm just like, no, there's really no excuse. She's on enough states to get over 500 electoral votes. Yeah, 517. So there's really, so it's just getting the exposure and getting the word out and stuff like that. So I think that you know, eventually I think third party or independent is going to break through in this country. I don't know when, but I think eventually it's going to break through.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's my time. JB, someone was asking in the chat, tell them about your YouTube channel. I mean, we're on RBN, we're on Revolutionary Blackout, but you have your own channel.
Oh, yeah. I have my own YouTube channel called the JB Font channel. If you guys would like to, you guys can subscribe there. Just type in JAYBEFAUNT, and then you guys can subscribe there. And then I also am here with Sabs on RBN on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show. And then I do my own JB show on Sundays on RBN. So, and I'll be in Tampa this Tuesday to cover the Uhuru movement, the Uhuru 3. I'll be covering that on the ground in Tampa. So hopefully I get to meet Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Penny Hess, Jesse Neville on the ground there. And I think Jill Stein's going to be there too. So, all right, tune in.
Yeah. Don't forget that, guys. Tuesday, the Uhuru trial begins in Tampa. So
definitely
follow JB for that. I have a hard stop. JB, thank you so much for coming on. In fact, I'm about to jet, but Eric's going to come on and read the super chats because I am supposed to go somewhere else. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today, guys. Come back Tuesday night. Miss Blakely, you know her on Twitter just as Blakely. She will be here. She creates pretty viral TikTok videos. She has some things to say. So stay tuned for that. Eric, I'm ready whenever you are. You just got to do the soupies.
All right. I will do that thing.
Hi. You know how to end the stream? You know how to do that?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
No problem. All right. Yes. Sabby had to go. Oh, she ended up with my icon, but that's all right. All right. How's everybody doing tonight? I'm jumping in just so Sabby can have an early exit here. She had some plans and so forth. So we'll read out some super chats, maybe make a few comments here and there. JB just did a really, really interesting interview just today. It broadcasts on his RBN show with Jason Smith about China. That was really interesting. So definitely recommend that. And Blakely coming on to Sabby Sabs. That could be interesting. Anyway, that'll be next week. Let's see about these super chats. Thanks for the super chat, Wasim. This is why I support Mexico's judicial reform of voting judges and giving them term limits, since Brazil's Supreme Court approved an ban. Thanks for that one. And thanks for the super chat, DC. Adidas, UND, Puma were literally, I think you meant to say and. I'll do the spell correct for you, DC. Adidas and Puma were literally founded by Nazis. Thanks for that one. And thanks for this super chat, Halima. Who controls speech in Brazil? Brazil or Elon Musk? X is a platform owned by foreign interest. Brazil should adhere to foreign interest control of social media. Build your own platforms, self-sufficiency. Thanks for that. I mean, I know it was one thing I saw in the chat was that there were a lot of people kind of, certainly noting that Elon has no trouble doing censorship on his Twitter X platform when it suits him. And it's definitely a fair point, but the main point is, these social media platforms, they should be going by more of a legal standard. There should really only be censorship if the speech is like actually illegal by a reasonable legal standard. And so, Elon is wrong when he does it, and Brazil is wrong when they're clamping down in this way for, obvious reasons. Thanks for this one, Cynical. We got to remember that the petite bourgeoisie spent years selling out the U.S. people. So, of course, they don't have a problem with selling out Palestinians. And thanks for this one, Dylan. If Trump won in 2020, less people would have died. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I really, similar to, I think you've heard Sabby say the same thing. I really don't buy into this idea that Trump is anti-war and would be, so much better on those fronts. They're both serving the corrupt corporate interests in the military-industrial complex. And that's really, to my mind, how you really have to evaluate these things. The only real way, if you want to get into some serious systemic change and serious life saving, is a candidate like Stein, or a real peace candidate. Oh, and by the way, I got a new camera. Let's see how that's looking. But let's see. Thanks for this super chat from Trusting Success. Hey, Sabby, I think the sadistic bombing will increase since Biden announced Hamas leaders will pay after their death of Hirsch. All right, I'm not sure about all that one, but thanks for the super chat. And thanks for this one also, Halima. Abandon Harris, absolutely. And thanks for the super chat, Edward Shore. Kamala H and Donald T are the same. And, that's kind of where you get if your analysis is more about up, down than left, right, whatever left, right means, right? And thanks for the super chat, Eric. Anti-Asian / Semitic laws were opportunistic co-ops for empire, not race. They'd have anti-black racism laws if it helped empire. Yeah, saying the real thing that's in play is helping the powerful. That they get their way. And thanks for this one, this super chat. I know myself, Brahmin India, i.e. Kamala, believes in caste slavery. I mean, it is something I think that hasn't come up very much, but there is a very problematic historic caste system in India. And it's if you dig into that history and how that works over there, it's really bad. And, whether, if you're in the lower caste, if you're poor in India, your life can be pretty miserable, and you're sure not getting on a plane and emigrating or coming to America if you're in that lower caste. And, I don't think it's something they fixed. Thanks, Dennis G, for gifting 10 Sabby Sabs memberships. Appreciate that. And I think 10 folks in the audience appreciated that. As you can tell here, we had a lot of chats built up. We're going through them. And thanks for this one. I know myself. Can a Brahmin Indian advocate for Palestinians? Well, I mean, there's that whole concept of class traders, right? And if class traders are true to, what's right, then, I think the struggle should welcome them. Thanks for the super chat, Catacombs. It's low because black women don't want to work with black men, and because of that, the standards of today's men aren't even motivated to be more. Thanks for that one, and thanks also for this one, Eric. So, the difference between Democrats and Republicans is that one may promise you a reach around. Don't hold your breath. All right, I know what you mean. And thanks for this one, none your business. Notice he imputed Dor, Taibbi, and others. Yeah, talking about what Kyle was saying, and I do think it is important to note just factually that like the people that Kyle was talking about, like Taibbi and Dor, and I forget who the third one was. None of those people explicitly endorsed Trump. So to be acting like they did just isn't accurate. And thanks for the super chat, Chris Ero. I found RBN Sabs specifically in December 2023. I pushed my YouTube algorithm to the left and haven't looked back since. I agree with JB. We are feared. And thanks for this one, Kyle is projecting, accusing Jimmy of what he and Crystal Ball are doing. Shameful. Yeah, it was kind of funny to see him talk about people playing lanes and changing positions and whatnot. It's going to be interesting to see, what Kyle does come November. I do think that he and Crystal are both going to fall into saying you have to vote blue. The other thing that I'm actually a little bit worried about is that come November, they're going to have managed to, in a sense, tone down what's happening in Gaza. They're certainly going to say they have. I think Bibi's going to try to declare victory of some sort, and I think just for electoral politics, they're going to try to tone things down by November, and they're going to try to reduce Gaza as an issue. And I hope it doesn't work, but I think that's going to be their play. Thanks for the super chat, Egg64. JB is right. Kyle, Crystal, the Majority Report, and Vanguard, TYT all swung back liberal once Biden stepped down, and they're back to business as usual. Yep. And of course, that's where the money is where you tend to see them shifting towards. And thanks for this one, Gala. Jimmy has equal amount of right wing and left wing guests, in my opinion. He has 10 times the integrity than Kyle would ever dream of having. Thanks for that one. And thanks for this one, Eric Hutzo. You are really killing my joy buzz. I hope not too much, Eric. The other thing we try to do, I know Sabby tries to do on the show is to have it not all be negative. We like to talk about things, where things can go and possibilities and how things can be better. Thanks for this one, Kevon Slims. Would love to see a debate / conversation between you and Kyle, meaning Sabby and Kyle. Yeah, that would be an interesting one. Thanks for this super chat, Hamila or Hamila. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing. How meds are made is very lax. So there is high carcinogens, cancers, toxicity. A system owned by pharma ensures their control of the process. Profits drive medicine, not treatment or health. Yeah, and the whole thing around that topic, unfortunately, is not something we can get into very much on YouTube because YouTube doesn't like any of that kind of talk. But we could talk about it on the call-in Zoom hangout sometime if people want to. Thanks for the super chat, Crash. Kyle is a joke. He was anti-Ukraine war. His audience hated it. He then never covered the war again. Bernie to Trump equals Bernie to Harris. Both are just as bad. Yep. Thanks for this one, Janice Anderson. DNC and RNC voters are the accelerationists. Post-duopoly voters are the ones trying to fix things before the entire system collapses. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, it's not going well, in a lot of ways. So I hear you and agree. And thank you very much, Matem, for this very generous super sticker. Appreciate that. Appreciate you. And thanks for this one, Hamala. Scam is neocon liberals, Kyle saying they're left. We're getting down to the end of these super chats. Thanks for this super chat, Lisenora. Patrice Colors is such a scammer. Black Lives Matter. And thanks for the super chat, Halima. Kyle watches RBN, and I think this is about Nick's interview with Jimmy. And ADL, now Kyle, coming after. Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility that was a whole kind of triggering thing. All right, so I will, wait, we got to don't forget the rock fins. All right, let me bring up the rock fin chat. Let's do a little resizing. There we go. Thanks for the tip comment on Rockfin JVB. You says, thank you, Sabby, for introducing us to Jamal. He knows what it takes, and it gives me hope. Appreciate that. JVB holding it down over there on the Rockfin. So, Yeah, in closing, I just wanted to say also that what's happening in Gaza, in my opinion, it is not like we shouldn't view it as an anomaly. It's really a more visible and obvious example of what a billionaire controlled capitalist system produces. And the root causes of that and the root causes of, I would submit, really all our major problems are the big money and corruption. And nothing's really going to get better until we fix those things and fix this deeply corrupt system. And, the acronym I like is MCDS, which stands for Money, Corruption, Demands, and Solutions. And if you want to see my thoughts on some of those things, you can go over to 11demands.org. But it's this idea of really focusing on the money and corruption. And from there, you go to demands, and then that gets you flowing into the solutions. And with that, we are going to call it a night. I know it's not the same as Sabby going out here, but you'll have to bear with me. And let me get the thing I'm supposed to play here at the end. Here it is. Got to get the outro ready. All right. And so I'll, as Sabby says, and thanks for people in the chat. Appreciate you all. We'll see you, Sabby, next time live on Tuesday at 7. Apparently she's going to have an interview with Blakely, which should be a discussion with Blakely, which should be quite interesting. And in the meanwhile, as Sabby says, have a good night. Keep up the fight. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.